What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonflight video. I hope you're all doing very well. There has been an incredible landslide of news that has come out today. Multiple interviews with Blizzard devs talking about 10.0.1 that's coming in the future. Changes to Affixes coming. There's the dungeons that are coming. The new dungeon rotation is out for Season 2 of Dragonflight. It's all going to be there. I'm going to talk about some of the big changes that are coming to 10.0.1 in a different video. Today, I'm just going to focus on the release date of 10.0.7 with all of its changes. And then the seasonal affixes are going to be changing in 10.0.1. And then I'm going to talk about the new dungeon rotation coming in 10.0.1 as well. So really, really cool stuff going on. And I'm going to talk about all that stuff in today's video. Let's just dive right in. All right, Blizzard has announced patch 10.0.7 is coming March 21st. That is just a couple weeks from now. Prepare to return to the Forbidden Reach and uncover more secrets of the Dragon Isles. Dragon Aspects also includes Orc and Human Heritage Armor, Winterpelt Furbolg faction, the new Monk races, significant class changes including the Ret Paladin rework, and of course the Primordial Stones are going to be a part of that as well, a brand new system that we get to play around with. So I'm very excited for 10.0.7. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's happening in a few weeks. So that's going to be awesome. Going to be so fun to jump into that. Here's the next big change that's coming. There's going to be no seasonal affix in Dragonflight Season 2. So this is really interesting. Of course, Thundering has been a really, I would say, a sore spot for most people. It's not really that fun. It's not terrible. Like, I've enjoyed playing with it, but it's not super fun. Let's be real. The fact that you can sort of kill your enemies by getting stunned because you didn't get rid of the debuff in time. There has been some pretty amazing seasonal affixes over the years, and ones that I have actually thoroughly enjoyed. And I know some people don't like the seasonal affixes whatsoever, but there's actually been some pretty good ones. You can see here, a lot of people didn't like Prideful. I thought Prideful was actually fine. It allowed you to sort of like modify the percentage of the dungeon, because it obviously triggered on every 25% of the dungeon. So you had to be really careful how you were pulling. That was sometimes annoying, but it also allowed you to plan ahead, which was kind of cool. I thought Infested was awesome. Really loved the Infested one with the Gahoonies everywhere. Awaken was one of the better ones that they did, where you could skip certain chunks of the dungeon, right, with those obelisks, and just skip trash packs entirely. It allowed you to be really creative with your routing. And I actually loved, was it encrypted? Yeah, the encrypted one was really fun. Mostly because these Automa that you would kill in Shadowlands Season 3, I believe, the Automa that you killed were like, they would give you all your mana back and like all your cooldowns back. And that was amazing. It allowed you to just go crazy and do really, really big pulls and blow all your cooldowns. And then you get all your resources back, and then you go to the next pack. So some of these affixes I think are actually awesome. I know a lot of them have been met with frustration. Things like Prideful in particular was really frustrating for people. And then most recently, of course, Thundering has been a real sore spot for a lot of people. So Blizzard's response has basically been that they're getting rid of these seasonal affix. I don't know if this is permanent. It sounds like what Morgan Day is saying is that it is kind of a bit permanent. And here's one of his reasons, the main reason for him doing it. He says, we've taken a big step back there and are looking at holistically. One major change we're making is actually we're not going to have a level 10 affix. And the reason is the scaling will continue to kick in. Sorry, the seasonal affix was created. Here he says it here. The seasonal affixes were created as an idea back in Battle for Azeroth, where because you had the same dungeon pool for like a 2-year period of time, the seasonal affix was there to really mix things up, to shake it up and give you some variety in your gameplay, as opposed to just doing the same dungeons with the same affixes over and over and over again. So that was their original intent with seasonal affixes. And so I think because there's a brand new dungeon pool in each season now, their philosophy can change in their minds, because they don't need to bring in this, you don't need to mix it up, because you're getting a mix up with new dungeons. But the large argument that I've heard from a lot of people is like they still enjoy the seasonal affix, even if you're bringing in new dungeons every 6 months. So I don't think this is a really good argument for Morgan. I think that it would still be fun to have a seasonal affix versus not having any affix at all. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. They're also refreshing the level 7 bucket of affixes. So this is the ones, this is Quaking, Grievous, Volcanic, Storming, and Explosive. Morgan Day addressed some of the concerns, announcing they are looking at this season. Here he says it here. We're really taking a closer look at the level 7 bucket and how much opportunity there is for counterplay. How much of that is making your healer's life harder versus how much of that is there an opportunity where if you play really well, you can negate the affix and use your utility really well or whatever it may be. So we're definitely looking at that really more along the lines of an affix refresh as well as the no level 10 affix. So really interesting to see they're making some big changes here mid-expansion to the Mythic Plus affix pool, getting rid of a seasonal affix as well. Let me know what you guys think about that section. I really wish they would keep the seasonal one in and just make it more fun than Thundering was, because I do think even though we're getting a 6-month, refresh on the dungeons, and it's going to keep happening over the course of Dragonflight's lifespan, I do think we still need a seasonal affix there as well. All right, last on the list here is going to be the Season 2 dungeon rotation. Freehold is indeed back. So some people were predicting this is what was going to happen. So here's what they're bringing into Season 2. Mythic Plus Season 2 returns. Sorry, excuse me. Returning dungeons. Neltharian's Lair, Freehold, Underrot, and then the Vortex Pinnacle from Cataclysm. So along with that, of course, we're going to have Halls of Infusion, Brackenhide Hollow, Uldamon, and Neltharis. So this is your full Season 2 list right here. It's really interesting. I think that I have a couple of comments here. Number one, I don't know how I feel about Freehold and Underrot coming back, and actually Freehold and Neltharian's Lair in particular. I've run these dungeons like hundreds and hundreds of times, like so many times I can't even count them really, because Mythic Plus existed in these expansions, and so I just run them so many times. I actually really do miss the Underrot. I've run that a lot of times as well, but for whatever reason, I miss this one more than I miss Freehold and Neltharian's Lair. So I'm not really sure what to think about this. Vortex Pinnacle is interesting. I'm going to jump into each one of the dungeons in a second here, but I think in particular for Freehold and Neltharian's Lair, I'm not really looking forward to it because I've already run them hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times, and now there's not going to be a seasonal affix. So it's literally just going to be all the regular affixes that we're used to with all the exact same routing that we're used to doing, that we've done hundreds if you've played these dungeons. So there's like nothing new except for the interesting gear that you might be able to go get from these dungeons. So let's see if the gear in here is actually worth the pursuit of these dungeons. All right, so let's start with the Vortex Pinnacle, which is the Cataclysm dungeon they're adding. It only has 3 bosses. I don't know if you guys have ever done this dungeon, but the trash in here can be very frustrating at times. There are some really nasty trash mobs here. It's really full of like Draconoid dudes plus dragons. Very interesting. But here's the loot. Number one, there is a mount you can get, which I think is actually quite cool. It's a pretty cool looking mount. There are several weapons in here, which is super cool as well. There's also one trinket, which is kind of like, trinkets tend to be the chase items that you're looking for in a lot of dungeons. None of the weapons have any extra, like, procs on them, so there's nothing to chase there. This trinket's very simple. It's more of a tanking trinket. Increase your maximum health. Shares a cooldown with Battlemaster trinkets, so nothing special there. But what I think is interesting is actually there are items in here that have socket bonuses on them. So you can see here the Fallen Snow shoulder guards. I can put a prismatic socket in there and I get a socket bonus. Of course, it's all scaled down. It only gives you 1 intellect. But imagine if this was scaled up. Imagine if Blizzard kept this in here and then scaled the bonus up. So that maybe if you were wearing a couple different pieces of the gear that has this, so here's another one here, you could get multiple socket bonuses potentially. That would make these items really good chase items, right? Like let's look at 2 leather. Here's a leather one here and another leather one here, right? So this is the crit bonus that you're getting. I don't know. Maybe If this was scaled up to, say, give you an extra like 100 crit or 150 crit just because of the prismatic socket bonus, that would be a really interesting idea, and that would make these items chase items in this dungeon. That would make you want to run the Vortex Pinnacle besides getting the mount and maybe besides getting this trinket if you really want it. Otherwise, there's no real reason to go in and do these dungeons. Like, there's regular gear in here, and that's fine. But the reality is there needs to be chase items, in my opinion, in these dungeons. And these, like, prismatic socket bonus things might be kind of cool. I don't think this one would work because we don't have a meta socket anymore. But you get my point. Maybe there's an opportunity here for Blizzard to create chase items in this dungeon. Moving on, there's Neltharion's Lair. One problem with the Legion dungeons is that there are no weapons because we had our artifact weapons. So there's no weapons to hunt down in here, which is a really big deal. There are some interesting trinkets, kind of. I used to have this landslide trinket on my paladin. It was okay, but it's not the best. The spike tongue might be okay for ranged people. I think this was a decent trinket for ranged classes. Then there's a couple of tanking trinkets here as well. Are these good enough as like chase items? Maybe. They might be good. I'm not entirely sure. One thing that kind of bugs me about Neltharion's Lair is that we really, we went and did this in recent time walking stuff. There was Legion time walking a little while ago, like months and months ago. But it's just like I'm used to running this dungeon so many times, and in Shadowlands in particular, we ran this in the late part of Shadowlands. I ran this a bunch of times, so I don't know. I'm not super inspired to want to go in here, but there are some interesting trinkets. Maybe that's enough to drive you to come into this dungeon, but there are no weapons at all because it's a Legion dungeon, so that's kind of discouraging. Then, of course, we have the 2 Battle for Azeroth dungeons. Freehold, which is interesting. It's got the Harlan's Loaded Dice trinket, which was a very good agility trinket. One of the better agility trinkets. That's pretty good. There are some weapons in here as well. None of them have any extra effects, though. So they might have good stats for your character, and that's fair enough, but there's no extra effects on them. However, the Underrot does actually have some interesting weapons here. This one here in particular, the fist weapon. This is an agility fist weapon. Your melee attacks have a chance to poison the enemy. So this is very strong because it still has main stat. It doesn't have any extra stats though, right? No haste, verse, mastery, or crit. But if I remember correctly, I believe this was a very good weapon that was worth chasing down. So that's kind of cool to have that in the pool. And then there are, of course, trinkets as well. This one is maybe the most interesting. Attacks have a chance to grow spores. When they burst, it heals you and deals damage to enemies. Might be good for a tank. Might be good for a healer. I don't know, like a melee healer. Not entirely sure. These other trinkets are kind of whatever. This shadow one might be good for like a caster. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to look it up, but this is probably the dungeon with the most loot that you might want to go chase down. It, of course, does have artifact Azerite armor, sorry, but we don't need that anymore. So, yeah, interesting there. Let's look at the loot from the 4 dungeons that are from this expansion. Okay, so we're getting Uldaman, Neltharis, Halls of Infusion, and Brackenhide. These 4 right here. So, Uldaman has some decent trinkets here. You can get the Lost Dwarves doing a bunch of damage. I'm not sure how good this actually is. We haven't scaled it up yet into Mythic Plus, but maybe it's only a 2-minute cooldown, so that's pretty good. This is a good tanking trinket here, of course. You absorb damage, and it's sort of like not a cheat death, but it's a full stamina trinket, which is very interesting. 542 stamina at 359. Imagine this sucker in Mythic Plus, like 653 stamina. It probably goes up to like 1,000 stamina in high Mythic Plus. That is really interesting to me, to just stack a ridiculous amount of extra health on your tank. I think that's kind of cool. This, I think, is a very good haste trinket. This is going to be a real big chase item for casters in particular. Tear through time, steal power, gaining intellect for 20 seconds. That's pretty insane. Haste is good for a lot of casters as a base stat, and then getting that on-use intellect for big burst windows, I think, is going to be a big chase item as well. So that's pretty good. Let's go to Neltharis. This one has an amazing melee trinket. In my opinion, I love the Magma Mammoth Scale, it's super good. It like just reaches out and smacks people. It procs all the time. I found this procced. I got it while I was leveling my Feral Druid. It procced all the time, so I love this thing. This is also good. In Kittle, it's an on use, of course, so you throw a spear, which does fire damage split between all enemies. The Eruptive Flames return to you, increasing your crit for each enemy struck. So really, really good in Mythic Plus. And it's got a low cooldown, so might actually be really good. It gives you main stat, it's going to give you extra crit, and it has an on-use damage effect. So it checks all the boxes. Usually these kinds of trinkets like either have an on-use effect and don't have extra secondary stats, or only have secondary stats and have no on-use effect. So it is both, which I think is quite good. And then this one is interesting. You're going to get a secondary stat. You don't have a choice. It's going to reorder whichever treasure. So I think you'll get to understand like which secondary stat you're going to get here, but it's not the same every time. So this might not be really good. If you don't care about certain secondary stats, that could be pretty bad for you. Excuse me. Halls of Infusion. Harmful spells have a chance to hit the target with Jagged Ice, and then you can shatter all the shards, dealing frost damage split between all nearby enemies and decrease the move speed. So we'll see. This is an agility trinket, so this is just for like Enhancement Shaman, Feral Druid, Survival Hunter. We'll have to see. I don't know. This doesn't sound good to me, but it might be okay. This gives you Mastery, and then increases your Intellect. Might be good for a Shadow Priest, but a 3-minute cooldown is pretty rough. That's pretty rough. And not having main stat on a trinket is also kind of rough, okay? This one is pretty good, though. I love this idea as a healing trinket. Increase an ally's armor and then heal them. These effects are increased based on the current health of your target and are most powerful when they're about to die. So I love healing trinkets for healers. I kind of hate this narrative that you have to use DPS trinkets on a healer. So I love this idea. Giving your tank a bunch of armor. Like, this is 4,000 armor at 372 item level. What if it's at 415, 420, 450 item level? It's probably going to go really high. That might be a lot of armor you could give them. So I love that idea right there. Finally, we have Brackenide Hollow, of course. Looking at these trinkets here, your abilities have a low chance to summon a gnoll to assist you. They may deal damage, poison your target, or increase your highest secondary stat. That's really cool. If this thing procs a lot, I love this idea. Getting extra damage, getting secondary stats, I love it. It's really, really cool. Idol of Pure Decay. I found this thing proc quite a bit. I got it while leveling my Shadow Priest, and it actually did a decent amount of damage. So I hope that this thing scales well in terms of its damage. It might end up being pretty good. And then this one's interesting. You have to hurt yourself to absorb 50% of the damage up to 200,000. So I don't really know. This one seems really weird to me as a tanking trinket. You don't usually want to hurt yourself to get a shield, but maybe for like a Blood Death Knight, this would be amazing, because then you've already taken damage, so you can heal yourself with Death Strike once the mobs start hitting you. But you can also give yourself a shield on pull so that you don't immediately like die. Death Knights have a really difficult time starting a pull, right? They kind of die right away. So I don't know, maybe it's good, maybe not. All right, finally, let me just look at the weapons really quickly in the 4 dungeons that are coming for Dragonflight in Season 2. Tons of weapons. Tons and tons of weapons here. This is just Oldemon. Brackenide Hollow has like 6. Halls of Infusion has 4. And then Nelthera's also has 4. And it also has Forge Storm, which I think is going to be absolutely an enormous chase item. It does not have main stat on it, but it does have secondary stats and an additional effect. Your attacks have a chance to ignite a Forge Storm, causing your attacks to explode for fire damage evenly split amongst all enemies. So that might be really cool. Maybe you're going to be missing the main stat and it's not worth it. They'll have to sim it or whatever. I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's cool. It has an extra effect. Bottom line is, all these dungeons have a lot of weapons. So doing any of them is probably going to be worth your time, which is always really exciting. That's exactly what you want when you're running these sorts of things. So, all right, guys, that's it for me in this video. I just wanted to, of course, talk about the first couple of news articles that come out. There's a million things that has come out on Wowhead. I will cover them all in other videos, but patch 10.0.7, March 21st. Very interesting. That's coming. Potentially no seasonal affix going forward in the game. After 10.0.1, we'll have to see how they do it. They're refreshing the level 7 affix bucket as well. Quaking, Grievous, Volcanic, Storming, and Explosive are getting a bit of a facelift potentially. And then some interesting gear from the dungeons that are going to be in Season 2 of Dragonflight. Notharian's Lair, Freehold, Underrot, Vortex Pinnacle are coming in as past content with some interesting loot. Vortex Pinnacle, of course, having those interesting socket bonuses potentially. We'll have to just see how that kind of plays out on the PTR, which I will be jumping into this week. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I love you all. I will see you in the next one.